Although it was cold, the creatures were enormous. A few of the genuinely enormous animals that dominated the Ice Age landscapes are examined by our knowledgeable guide. The last glacial period is a more accurate name for what we now refer to as the Ice Age, the most recent extended period during which global temperatures fell significantly and polar ice spread to cover much of the Earth. As there have been multiple ice ages, over 100,000 years have passed since it began approximately 115,000 years ago. Many animal lineages grew and disappeared during that period. It is known that numerous large mammal species perished during the transition from the Ice Age to the current interglacial era in particular. From around 50,000 to 5,000 years ago, a combination of a rapidly changing climate, changing vegetation, and a rise in human hunting is believed to have caused these extinctions. In addition to the famous woolly mammoth, these megafauna also included enormous cave bears and gigantic sloths that were nearly 12 feet tall. You can read about some extraordinary, now extinct, creatures that existed during the ice and snow era in this list. 10 Ice Age creatures that are no longer alive. 1. Neanderthals. Since Homo sapiens first appeared about 300,000 years ago, they survived the last cold age. However, we were not the only prehistoric people present. Our evolutionary relatives, the Neanderthals, also survived the Arctic conditions with us. Although it evolved around the same time as us, this species of hominid perished during the Ice Age about 40,000 years ago. Numerous hypotheses as to why they vanished include assimilation into the human gene pool, out-competition by Homo sapiens, or illnesses they brought with them. Recent hypotheses, however, contend that climate change may have been the main cause. Though they had behavioral and biological defenses against the cold, it is believed that they still struggled to survive the extreme cold and a shortage of food. The reason we did and they didn't is an intriguing one. 2. Woolly mammoths, Mammuthus primigenus. The woolly mammoth is arguably the most well-known of all Ice Age creatures, in part because of the movie character Manny. Woolly mammoths existed between about 300,000 and 10,000 years ago. Due to the numerous frozen specimens that have been discovered with soft tissue preserved, the appearance of these elephant-sized creatures is perhaps the best known of any prehistoric species. They were extremely well adapted to the weather thanks to their thick coat of hair, ample fat reserves, and specifically designed antifreeze blood. They were crucial to the continued existence of early humans during the Ice Age because their coats, meat, and bones served as essential forms of food, warmth, and building materials for both Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. 3. Giant ground sloth, Megatherium americanum. The sloths we know and adore today were nothing like these monstrous creatures. They were genuinely enormous, reaching a height of 3.7 meters when standing on their hind legs and weighing up to 4 tons, as opposed to the 5 kilograms of a modern sloth. In fact, it was the biggest bipedal mammal ever because it could move on its hind legs. They inhabited the South American grasslands and woodlands, and fossils from the time they resided there, roughly 400,000 years ago to 10,000 years ago, have been discovered. It was truly a vegetarian, feeding on leaves and grasses despite having enormous, terrifying talons. 4. Cave bears, Ursus speleus. The cave bear was considerably bigger, though it was still quite large. The biggest cave bears, which weighed between 400 and 1,000 kilograms, were about the size of polar bears today. They were widespread in Asia and Europe, including the UK. Due to the discovery of a perfectly preserved specimen in the Russian Arctic in 2020, whose remains were made visible by permafrost melting, we have a very clear notion of what they looked like. Even its nose and canines were unharmed. The specimen, which lived toward the end of the period of the cave bears, which are believed to have gone extinct 24,000 years ago, was dated to between 22,000 and 39,500 years old. It is believed that human hunting and rivalry with them for caves may have led to their extinction. 5. Dire wolf, Canis dirus. That's correct. Dire wolves were actual animals, not just fictional pets from Game of Thrones. Nevertheless, new genetic research has shown that, despite their name and many physical similarities, they were actually much more closely related to African jackals than to gray wolves. From about 250,000 to 13,000 years ago, these canids appeared to be a typical part of the American landscape during the late Pleistocene, prowling the grasslands, plains, and woods and consuming megafauna like gigantic ground sloths. With more than 4,000 specimens discovered in California's La Brea tar pits alone, there is almost too much ancient information available for this species. 6. Saber-toothed cat, Smilodon genus. We've learned a lot about the saber-toothed cat, another well-known Ice Age predator, thanks to the La Brea tar ponds. More than 3,000 fossilized people have been extracted from the ooze, and their molars in particular have proven to be a useful source of data regarding their diets and way of life. As opposed to what was previously believed, scientists have been able to analyze the wear patterns on their iconic gnashers to determine that they likely preyed primarily on smaller forest-dwelling animals like tapirs and deer instead of very large prey like bison on the open plains. They were ambush predators, like many large cats of today. 7. Irish elk, Megaloceros giganteus. Given the scientific term, it should be obvious that this species of deer was huge. They were the tallest known deer, alive or extinct, standing over 1.8 meters tall at the shoulder. Given that they could reach a whopping 3.5 meters in length, these enormous horns must have been breathtaking to see. Although this elk was not unique to Ireland, despite its moniker, some of the best preserved fossilized examples have been discovered there. The most recent remains, which date to around 7,700 years ago and are from western Russia, appear to be yet another casualty of the megafaunal extinction event that took place at the close of the Ice Age. 8. Giant beaver, Castoroides genus. The giant beaver, with an average length of about 1.8 meters, carries on the subject of larger versions of contemporary animals. Its teeth were equally as big, some of which were as long as 15 centimeters, or about the size of a hot dog. Although there isn't concrete proof that they constructed dams like contemporary beavers do, it is conceivable that these enormous incisors were used for woodcutting. What we do know is that they may have had simpler social and behavioral structures because their brains were smaller and smoother than those of contemporary beavers. 9. Megalania, Varanus priscus. Mega mammals have dominated this roster thus far, but what about other Ice Age species? In reality, not all of the world was icy, and some places were still habitable, despite the fact that it was difficult for cold-blooded species like reptiles to survive frozen Ice Age conditions across much of the globe. One of them was Australia, a continent governed by enormous reptiles. These included enormous land-dwelling crocodiles, huge snakes, and Megalania, a genuinely monstrous Komodo dragon relative. The main land predator at the summit of the food chain, this monitor lizard grew to an estimated length of 7 meters. The Australian ecosystem may have become out of balance as a result of the extinction of its mega reptile predators, enabling introduced mammals to proliferate unchecked. 10. Diprotodon genus. Another element of the Australian Ice Age landscape was a massive marsupial mammal, which was actually the biggest marsupial ever to have existed. Diprotodon dwarfed the red kangaroo, which stands at only 2.7 meters and 90 kilograms today, measuring an estimated 4 meters from head to tail tip and weighing as much as 3,500 kilograms. Wombats and koalas are essentially their smaller modern relatives. It also holds the distinction of being the only marsupial species known to migrate during specific seasons, traveling great distances in quest of food and water sources.